Here's a pitch on the way. He swings and fouls it off, and the man from Walla Walla will take that one home. Swing, there's a drive to left. That one is long gone.
Now, I might have been a small part of your life, but you've been a very large part of mine. And it's my privilege and honor to share with you the greatest game of all.
Hey, what's going on, nation? AJ Reilly here for our next installment of The Corner, our weekly baseball show regarding the Tigers and their previous series and their upcoming series. We are here in between each and every one of them to break down what happened and potentially talk about what's going to happen in the upcoming series. I'm excited for today's show. We have a leadoff featuring one of my favorite players in Major League Baseball and some bad news surrounding him. We're going to talk about that gritty series against the Padres, this very difficult series upcoming against the Blue Jays. And then we're going to talk about the MLB Trade Deadline. And that's all that we can talk about up until August 2nd, because that is a very big day for us. But before we jump into the leadoff, I do want to remind you to click that bell and hit that like button. Make sure you subscribe at our YouTube page. And you can also follow The Corner on Twitter at DSN at The Corner for all your Detroit sports, Detroit Tigers news on a daily basis. And we like to kick off the show with a leadoff. And this leadoff is a little bit more of a difficult one to talk about because news broke on Wednesday that one of the greatest baseball players that I personally have ever seen, and statistically one of the best of all time, even at, a age where he could add to those all-time numbers, has a very rare back condition. Now, Mike Trout has been out of the lineup for the Los Angeles Angels since July 12th. And according to CBS Sports, R.J. Anderson and Mike Axia, they said that the Angels do, however, have a better idea of what Trout is dealing with now. They thought it was ribcage inflammation, but now they have a better idea. And he's being diagnosed with a rare condition that's called costovertebral dysfunction at the T5 vertebrae. And according to some doctors, this is what this means. It's a pretty rare condition, and it's not one that they see all the time. So they interviewed some of the most well-known spine surgeons, and it's not a condition that they see all the time. And so for it to happen in a baseball player, this doctor said, we just have to take into consideration what he puts himself through with hitting and swinging on a daily basis, and just be prepared for that, and then also playing in the outfield, diving for balls, jumping into walls, and things of that nature. Now, Trout has said that these were all over-exaggerations. Everybody was thinking this was the end of his career, that he was done now at this point, and he said, I'll be back and playing in 2022. And as far as the Angels are concerned, they're waiting to see how a cortisone shot works in his back that I guess that he took this week. But it just seems like deja vu. You have one of the best baseball players of this generation, the best. Everybody wants to argue about other names, but they're always comparing them to one person, and that's him. If the best generational player, and he can't stay on the field. Baseball's a grind. Baseball's difficult. 162 games, grueling, and Trout plays hard. But since the 2019 season, he's been injured. He played 53 of the 60 games in the pandemic season. He played 36 games last year, and this year he's only played 79. He's struggling to stay on the field. But let's talk about Trout. And let's talk about what if his career were to end. Where does that leave him? Well, personally, He's one of the best baseball players I've ever seen, and I've had the privilege of seeing him in person play a number of times. But since he's debuted in 2011, from 2012, he had 9 straight top 5 MVP finishes. He won 3 times in 2014, 16, and 19. And he was also Rookie of the Year. He's 69th all-time in WAR at 79.7, 39th all-time in offensive WAR. He's 54th all-time in winning probability added, 6th all-time in weighted runs created plus. He has a career slash line of 303, 416, 584, and he has a 419 weighted on-base average. Simply put, he's one of the best players in the game ever. We're talking about a guy that still has a number of years potentially on his career where he could produce. Now, injuries are going to obviously play a very significant factor of that. But let's not forget or take for granted the fact that this is one of the greatest players in all of MLB history. Yes, he's been on the Angels, who are entirely irrelevant. So let's not gloss over that point. But just because you're on a bad team does not mean that you are not a great player. And as we know, baseball is a team sport that needs more than just one player to win. But let's not let that discount truly how great Mike Trout is. I hope personally that he's able to stay on the field and he's able to continue to play, because I do love watching him play. So I wish him a speedy recovery, and I hope that he returns in 2022, 2023, and beyond, because baseball needs superstars. They have a great young crop of talent. But let's not forget about the guy who for the last decade has been the number 1 player in all of baseball. Wish you well, Mike. Hope that the back heals up. Hope that you're able to deal with that in a way that keeps you on the field, because you are fun to watch and you are one of the best that has ever played this game. So speedy recovery. Now let's talk about our boys in Detroit and that gritty series that they just had against one of the better teams in the NL West. I told you that before this series in my preview that it was going to be a very difficult series, specifically because of the pitching that the Padres had. And that pitching is good. Darvish struck out 11 in the finale. Clevenger was cruising in Game 2. But the Tigers stood on their head. The Tigers ended up winning this series and were competitive in all 3 baseball games, which is a great sign and something that is nice to see. Now, I don't want to get, swing the pendulum completely the other way from what we have talked about on this show, because this is still a team that is not great. A lot of holes, a lot of problems. But they've pulled out and found a way to win these games. Go to Game 1, they won 12-4. Haas hit a grand slam, which got the scoring started. Jeimer Candelario swung a very hot bat. And we're going to talk about Jeimer Candelario towards the end of this recap, because I don't want to let the moment pass. But in Game 2, against Mike Clevenger, they were struggling to scratch across runs. Candelario hit another home run. They had an opportunity in the bottom of the 9th to tie the game, and Reilly Green came through, hit a nice hanging slider to right field to score the game-tying run, and then Gregory Soto in the top of the 10th, just the wheels fell off. Could not find the strike zone, really struggling, and for all intents and purposes, we are hoping that the scouts that were there to see him left after the 9th inning, because he cruised through the 9th inning, but struggled in the 10th inning. And it's really interesting listening to A.J. Hinch talk about Game 2 prior to the finale. He was being interviewed by Dan Dickerson on the A.J. Hinch show, the pregame show, and he was talking about the rule change and how you automatically are putting pressure on pitchers to be perfect which is the whole purpose of the rule. Let's not miss that point. But it changed the way that Soto pitched. When he comes in and it's clean, he's just throwing. When he comes in the 10th and there's a guy on second and you can't make mistakes too often, if at all, he's aiming more, not throwing straight. And that seemed to be a problem. The defense let him down. He ended up giving up 3 runs. Tigers did score their run in the bottom of the 10th, but did ultimately drop the game 6-4. And look, it was a gutsy game. They didn't give up. You know, too many times this season we've seen this team not be able to scratch across runs and then just kind of get less competitive as the game goes on. But that was not the case in this series, and that was very refreshing to see. And that was especially refreshing in the finale on Wednesday, when they had a very gritty performance. Yu Darvish was doing Yu Darvish things. I mean, the guy is a video game. The way that his balls move and the way that he commands a number of different pitches and doesn't allow batters to get comfortable in the box is, as our good friend Jim Price would say, the art of pitching. And it was phenomenal. He had balls on strings. He was just shoving the entire game. And Skubal matched for a little bit, except for, the 39 pitch 4th inning, which ultimately I think was about 43 pitches after he threw his glove hat and a couple water bottles in the dugout. But you like to see that fire. Got nothing wrong with that. He's upset. Do I like the fact that it was around other players that could have potentially gotten hit by that? No, not necessarily, but I do love the fact that there's some fire. I do love the fact that there's some emotion because you want to see that. You want guys to do well. But down 3-2 in the bottom of the 9th, thanks to Candelario with 2 RBI singles who drove in their first 2 runs. Victor Reyes comes up with 2 strikes on him and guys on first and third. And Reyes hit a double off the right field wall to walk off the San Diego Padres and to give the Tigers a series victory, a much-needed series victory. And so there's some takeaways that we can take from this series. One, the team didn't give up, and that was nice to see. Very refreshing. We've been negative, and listen, we'll call a spade and give credit due when credit's due. But this was a big series win to hang your caps on. This was not a fledgling team. The Padres are a good team who most likely will be in the playoffs. This was a good series win, and it allows you to build some momentum as you cross the border heading into Toronto. But the other takeaway is Jeimer Candelario, and I don't want to get too high on this right now. He had a phenomenal series. He had 3 home runs in the series, a number of RBIs in the series. But I want to see it more often for me to get excited about anything. Do I think he's turned the corner? I'm going to go potentially he's turned the corner. But we saw Jonathan Scope earlier in the summer put together one good series. Win off. Was hot as could be. And hasn't done much since. So I want to see Candelario do that more before I say that he's turned the corner, but it was nice to see. Catching the ball out front, driving the baseball to the gaps, really doing the things that are necessary and the things that we've come to expect from him. Hit the ball hard. Be a hard out. So I want to see it more, and I especially want to see it this weekend as they move into Toronto, which is what we're going to talk about next. This preview of the Blue Jays series that's coming up in Toronto. Now, the Tigers are going to be without Andrew Chafin. He is going to be placed on the restricted list due to not being vaccinated for COVID. A.J. Hinch did mention before the finale with the Padres that they would not be intact, but they would make do. And it seems like it's not going to be as dire as some of the other teams, like the Royals, who had 10 players that could not play across the border. The Tigers are going to be without Andrew Chafin for this 4-game series with the Toronto Blue Jays. They are going to be facing off against a pretty decent pitching staff again. We have faced the Blue Jays previously, and it did not go well. This team is a very difficult out. They put the ball in play. They hit for power. They play good defense. They've got a lot of young guys that really play the game well. And it's going to take a very good pitching performance for the offense to get rolling and for them to potentially split this series. Now, I want to point out something that we've talked about on the corner previously, and I want to compare what we've seen in recent series to what we saw in the Padres series and equate that to what we need to see in the Blue Jays series. If you noticed in the Minnesota series, and we talked about this on the recap on Monday, but when pitchers are not crisp in the beginning innings and the defense is standing around, that has a dramatic effect on the offense. Against the Padres, our starting pitching was crisp. Not great. They had moments where they struggled, to be sure. But in those early innings, the offense was not, or the defenders were not standing out in the field just waiting for pitch after pitch to be thrown. We're not talking about 20, 30 pitch first innings. We had quick first innings, which kept the momentum going and allowed the bats to get off the field and on deck ready to hit. This is going to be key in the Toronto series for the Tigers. The Tigers are actually going to send Tyler Alexander out to start Game 1 Thursday night. They're going to be determined on Friday. Drew Hutchinson will take the mound on Saturday, and Garrett Hill will take the mound on Sunday. Now, when you look at this on paper, it's not great. If you were to look at this, about the only opportunity that the Tigers would have to win would be Tyler Alexander, which could most likely be a bullpen game anyways. They're looking to probably get 3 innings out of Alexander. Maybe get through the order once, maybe twice, and then turn it over. Hutchinson has kept them in the games, but he couldn't even get through 5 innings in a blowout of Game 1 of the Padres. And Garrett Hill has that 1 inning of implosion that has cost him pitches and innings eating in the majority of his starts this season. Now, we don't know who they're going to throw out there Friday night yet. But I would imagine somebody's going to get a call from Toledo. It could be one of the guys that they just signed, Chichi Gonzalez. Could be Daniel Norris. Could be Jacob Barnes. They'd have to make a 40-man move for that, but there's potential. Could also go with, maybe a back-to-back bullpen day. Who knows? Because you got Cisnero that's back and other guys that you could stretch a little bit. But the starting pitching is going to be key, because the Toronto Blue Jays are a very difficult out. And the Tigers are going to face some tough pitchers. They got Yusei Kikuchi is going to be starting game number 1 for the Blue Jays. Alex Manoah, All-Star, is going to be pitching game 2. Manoah has a less than 1 whip on the season and a 2.24 ERA. Pitching fantastic. Game 3, they're going to face off against Ross Stripling. And in Game 4, they're going to face off against Jose Barrios. Now, we've seen a couple of these guys before. But that was earlier in the season. This series is going to be a very tough series to win. Toronto is a very, very good baseball team. I think they have a 50% chance of making the playoffs according to Fangraphs. They're second in the AL East to the Yankees. They're young, they hit for power, they play good defense, they run the bases well. It's going to be a very tough series. So if the Tigers can show some of the grit that they had against the Padres, another team that was very good, maybe you can squeak out a win or two. A split in Toronto is like a series win. And that is what you're hoping for. So let's turn our attention then to something that I know is on the minds of everybody, and that's the MLB Trade Deadline. It's coming up August 2nd at 6 p.m. That is the cutoff. And it started to get kicked off with the New York Yankees making a move for Andrew Benintendi on Wednesday night. Andrew Benintendi no longer a Kansas City Royal. He is now a New York Yankee. It's rumored that there are 3 minor leaguers that are heading to Kansas City for Benintendi, which all but takes Robbie Grossman out of any type of trade conversation, as if he were in it at all. But one of the few places that you could see Grossman going would be New York as a replacement for Gallo or like a fourth outfielder type thing. Switch hitter, versatile off the bench, but all but takes him out of the trade conversation, which is fine because he's a free agent at the end of the year anyway. But really what we're looking at here is kind of listed in order of which way I think they will go, or the odds that they have to be traded. Really, you have a number of trade chips that could be tossed out. Fulmer, Gregory Soto, Jimenez, Chafin, potentially Jonathan Scope, and Tarek Skubal, as reported by Ken Rosenthal of The Athletic earlier this week. Because the Tigers are entertaining offers on him, which is a whole nother discussion that we've talked about in the past and would be a very hefty price tag for Tarek Skubal, or at least it should be. Now let's talk about Fulmer. Fulmer is a rental. He is a free agent at the end of the season. Fulmer is a very, very effective bullpen piece and somebody that nostalgia would tell us has a very high price tag, but reality tells us don't get too set on the fact that you want the world for Michael Fulmer when you're not going to get that. Expect to be disappointed in the return for Fulmer. I'm not even talking about Al Avila this week. I'm just talking about pure value at this point. I don't even want to get into the Avila discussion. Rental bullpen pieces, unless their name is Aroldis Chapman, are not going to fetch top-tier prospects. Fulmer's had his bumps in the road. He is a free agent at the end of the season. He's a very cheap rental. But I would not expect the world for Michael Fulmer. Some teams that, he could potentially fit at, and I hate to say this first one, but Minnesota. They have the 29th best bullpen in Major League Baseball. They desperately need bullpen help, and you're a little less concerned trading him in division given the fact that he is a rental. Toronto. Maybe Michael Fulmer does not get on the plane home. They have the 24th best bullpen in the game right now. It's all possible. Teams like the Yankees, obviously the Dodgers, are clearly always in the mix for bullpen help. Now Soto. Gregory Soto is another name to keep your eye on, given his triple-digit left-handed arsenal. But with Gregory Soto, he is, given his years of control left, he has 3 arbitration years left, and given his skill set and the fact that he has pitched in pressure situations, he is the most valuable trade chip that you have, not named Tarek Skubal. But with that comes the fact that if you are willing to forego those 3 years of arbitration and you're willing to trade him, then the return better be much, much greater than what you get for Michael Fulmer. It also should be better than what you returned for Justin Wilson from the Cubs, which netted you Candelario and Isaac Paredes. So if you trade Fulmer, or not Fulmer, but if you trade Soto, which you don't have to at this point, but if you trade him, the price tag better be lofty. Joe Jimenez is going to be entering his final arbitration year, so he has about a year and a half worth of control the remainder of this year and then next year. Another one that ups the value a little bit. Probably would bring about the same or less of a return to Michael Fulmer. Andrew Chafin. He has another year on his contract. He is owed $7.5 million in 2023. Potential fit in Seattle, who could use a left-handed reliever. St. Louis is another team that any of these relievers could fit on. Those are the teams, and these are the names to keep in connection. Fulmer, Soto, Jimenez, Chafin, Toronto, Minnesota, Seattle, St. Louis. And then, of course, obviously, you've always got your Los Angeles Dodgers and you've got your New York Yankees, especially with the Yankees losing Michael King for the season. You could definitely see them looking to add some type of bullpen piece. So let's talk about Tarik Skubal. It's not unwise to listen on Skubal at all. They should be listening on Skubal. But if the return does not net you something similar to at least a top 5 prospect in a good farm system, plus a minimum of 2 others, the value is not high enough. You're talking about a guy that is 25 years old. He's under team control for next year and then has 3 years of arbitration. So that's 4 years of control, not including the half a year this season. Has a great arsenal, strong competitor, and is pitching a lot better than a 39-pitch 4th inning would indicate. If the team does not knock you out of the park with their offer, you do not make the trade for Tarik Skubal. And I'm not saying that we take one guy to build around for the future, but if you were to sell off Skubal, it would hopefully be the nail in the coffin for Al Avila, because that would signal that this rebuild is not over, that we're rebuilding, and that it's going to take about a year to 2 years to actually compete, like 2024, 2025. So unless you are getting some very highly touted, very close to MLB ready prospects, and bats at that, then you do not trade Skubal. But all that is going to rest on the shoulders of one man, Al Avila, who you know well I do not trust. And we're going to see what happens come August 2nd at 6 p.m. This has been another edition of The Corner. I am AJ Reilly. I do want to remind you before we go to hit that bell and click that like button. Make sure you subscribe to our YouTube page. And you can also follow me on Twitter at DSN at The Corner. And until next series and the MLB Trade Deadline, as always, go Tigers.
Man on a mission, I'ma get it. You know I be on a what?